from 2015. Tomorrow is ANZAC Day, and many are quick to denounce the battle and war, yet claim to embrace freedom. But war is the pointy end of freedom. Without the willingness to fight and perhaps die, there is nothing to protect the free from the despots. And the ANZAC invasion of Gallipoli in support of the British, who spent more, gave more, and lost more, is a salient lesson. It is hard to say what people fought for when they lost, but the dream was far bigger. Maybe Turkey would not have completed her genocide of Armenians and Assyrians and many others. Maybe communism would not have become the fat parasite on the world for the 20th century. It was a good plan, which was almost successful despite many snafu. Those that lost were not to blame, and those who should be blamed were not entirely at fault. Young newsman Keith Murdoch was opposed to the campaign and conveyed that opposition while still being loyal. He hadn't liked the appalling waste of life, but his machinations meant that the lives lost were wasted. One can support the soldiers without liking the slaughter. None who fought there or ordered them there remains alive. Those who profited from the defeat are not alive today. But many suffer today from their loss. Today is the anniversary of the fall of Troy. The battle for Troy was prideful and the sacrifice wasteful. But the Greek victory was far less than the loss at Gallipoli. Pride exists before the fall as everyone is humbled, and it is worth thinking of those humble people who fought and died there. They lost that battle, but in winning the war, they gave us a legacy of freedom, leaving us eternally in their debt. And by fostering the freedom for their lives paid for, we honor them. The price of freedom is eternal vigilance. On this day, in 1547, the Battle of Muhlenberg was fought between Spain's Charles I and some minor nobles who were Protestant. Charles was Holy Roman Emperor and Catholic. Francis I of France was also Catholic, but had sided with the Ottomans to fight Spain. That fight had ended a few years previously, so Charles was unencumbered to square off against the band of Protestant cities called the Schmalkaldic League. The battle was one-sided. The Protestants bickered and were overrun. Charles I made it to the battlefield, but he was suffering an attack of gout, and so came on a litter, not a fine war horse as was painted later by his court painter Titian. Charles had nearly 30,000 troops at his disposal against 15,000. The panicked League forces broke rank and fled, so 7,000 League forces died in battle. There were a few scattered Protestant forces left over, and Charles ended up giving them religious freedom. But many went to England, where the young King Edward showed promise. In 1914, the Frank Hertz experiment showed, using a vacuum tube and electricity, the nature of atoms as suggested in 1913 by Bohr. Einstein described the experiment. It's so lovely, it makes you cry. The selfish, indulgent former treasurer Swan is wanting to run another term. He is part of the furniture Rudd wanted to save. He was an abysmal treasurer, promising surplus but delivering the largest debt Australia's ever faced, in peace or war. He was part of the Policy Brains Trust, which failed to deliver policy in the Australian Labor Party government. It is so sad the Australian Labor Party are so low. No sensible person wants to see them so weak and pathetic, so incapable of working for their own constituents. A healthy Australian Labor Party would pass legislation in Australia's interests. This Australian Labor Party doesn't.